What's one thing that if you were talking to your younger self in regards to Juneteenth, what is that one thing that you would tell your younger self about the benefits of Juneteenth? Now I'm gonna go in reverse. I'm gonna start with you, Latasha. Then work our way
That's a tough one.
That's why you got to kind of get some thoughts.
Yeah.
You know, I think growing up here in Arlington, I think what I wish my younger self would have been asking more questions of my friends and the people I came around. We were just hanging and enjoying life. We weren't really like understanding, because I think we were all probably too selfish, but we didn't have those communications. And so I wish I would have known. And then what my mom has shared with me is that as parents, they didn't know to tell us to do that either. She said there was no training. And so, you know, we just all went through the motions. And now as I'm older, I'm going, oh, you mean I should have asked some of those questions of some of my friends. I should have wondered what their experience was like as opposed to mine. But we were just going about our business. So I wish I would have done that. I wish I would have known to do it. But then again, I go back and my mom was like, we didn't know. We didn't even know. We didn't know to teach you that. So that'd be it.
Amazing, amazing. Tori?
Okay. I was gonna go to Carl first. All right.
It was over there like, please go to car, please go to car.
It's all good. It's all good.
Oh, that's hard.
If it's one thing to think about my younger self, I've always celebrated Juneteenth. I think for me, it would be to continue to carry on the legacy, continue to share with my kids the importance of Juneteenth, and not just my kids, family, and because it impacts generations. I think just sharing that knowledge and continue to keep that torch alive, what the Juneteenth spirit is about. It's always good to have food and fellowship, but let's remember why we have it. Remember the purpose in our celebration. That's what I would keep going from forward.
Love that. What about you, Carl?
You know what? I would say listening to our foreparents. A lot of times growing up, we did not listen because we say, you know, they don't know what they're talking about. You know, we don't want to hear that old stuff. But now we have a better understanding of the history and of the knowledge that they had, that they was willing to share if we only sit down and have listen and ask questions.
Awesome, awesome. Jerry?
So I'm going to put a different spin on this because I look at it from almost a little bit different lens, almost to think of what's the legacy you want to leave. And I always talk to my brothers about this, not just about from the fraternity standpoint, but you know, just as a Black man in America, what is the legacy that you want to leave your friends, your family, you know, on your career? So if I was to go back, you know, when I was young, I would be asking myself, why not now? Why not be the person you want to be at that particular point in time and be driving forward? So I don't have to go through some of those hardships and challenges that I went through to become the man I am now.
I like that. Terrence?
I think for me, I went on this journey probably about approximately 3 years ago, where I began to really want to ask those questions that Latasha is talking about. I wanted to understand I had some questions that I've probably been carrying for a number of years that I then had the courage to start exploring and really getting into the depths of these things that have been troubling me in terms of, I'll give you an example. I often wondered, why is it that Black people all over the world are treated in such a negative way? I mean, you can go anywhere. I mean, even what happened in Ukraine when they began to evacuate, and just the way that the Black people that were living in Ukraine were being treated by the Ukrainian people who were at war with Russia, and they were just trying to get out like everybody else. it just amazed me. And because at first I thought it was just I grew up in the South. So I thought it was just a Southern issue. Well, I grew up in the South, and, the Confederates were there, and, all the lynchings and all that happened more so in the South. But as I moved and I started moving around, I started noticing, even in Texas, I started noticing some of those same things. And I received some of the same treatment when I came to Texas. So I began to just question a number of things related to the history of Black people in America. And I started doing my research. And I guess for me, I wish I had done it sooner, because it has really freed me and it has opened up to me the possibilities of what life could truly be, that I'm not being hindered by that history, that I'm not being limited by any force that would prevent me from being exactly what I choose to be. But because I grew up in the South and I had a lot of that in my mind in terms of how we were treated, and it hindered me. It hindered my progression. And I know it did. And so if I could speak to my younger self, I would say even back as far as college, to have really spent time educating myself on the history of Black people in America. The real history, not the history we were all told was the history, which were basically lies, but the real history.
Wow. All right, so I'm listening to each of you, and I'm telling you, I'm loving and I'm impressed, and I'm humbled by all of the answers. Asking more questions, communications, training. I didn't know that I didn't know. Experiences, carrying on the legacy, want to impact generations, keep the spirit alive, listening to four parents. Maybe a lot of them knew what they were talking about if we would have just listened. What is the legacy you want to live? Why not now? Why not be the person today that you want to be 10, 20 years from now? I wished I would have researched sooner. I wished I would have researched history and not just taken as absolute what somebody else told me. That's a smorgasbord, right, of different perspectives, because we all have different perspectives. We're all raised very differently in different environments by different people, right? But if we would all look back at our younger selves, we would have been open. I would have been open to hear my granddad, when my granddad was talking about them old stories, I would just sit down and listen, right? I would have said, hey, I don't know what I don't know. So I'm telling you only from my one perspective. So I want you to be open to that. There's other perspectives out there. And I'm telling you, if we had that, just everybody would just sit back and think back to their younger self and see the limitation of that view as your younger self, I think we would be able to eliminate racism, bigotry, hatred, because I would look to you and I would say, okay, of course, my experience in this world up to this point was very different from yours. So let me be open to whatever's going on with you, right? I think it's an openness. I'm hearing in all of the answers and all of y'all's looking back at when you were, if you were young, what you had told your younger self. I could sum it up in a form of openness. You would have just been open to what you thought you did know, to what you didn't know, with a vision of who you wanted to be. Because I think we all, even as young people, have a vision of who we want to be. Yeah. But a lot of times we don't think from the vision of who we want to be. We think from sometimes the limitations of what history. But remember, history is just a version. It's literally just a version of a story. It's not the absolute story. Only the people who actually lived it had their absolute, and even their version is not absolute, because I can only tell you from my perspective. So I have to be open to everybody's perspective. And so I love, to me, that's what Juneteenth is about, right? Juneteenth is that kind of openness. It's openness to a freedom of being who you want to be, who you are and who you want to be. And I love that. I'm so
well said. Well said.
Very good.
All of y'all. All right.